Hey everyone, Michael Cattle, product lead at elevaite365 here. Today I'm just taking you through a quick kind of guidance demonstration of best practices for recording your test script in D365 Finance and Operations. I've already spun up a test script. I've just added the Microsoft login command and that's it. So you can see Finance and Operations is currently logged in. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and record a process. So let's enable the recorder. Once that's enabled, you'll see now if I hover over any button, it turns orange. If I click on it, it gets captured on the left side. So as a general rule, I recommend just going through your full process with the recorder enabled and then doing post-recording cleanup just to make sure it's a good test case, it's good automation, it's going to be rerunnable. So let's start by going into accounts payable. And here's the first suggestion I have. Anytime you navigate to a module, I recommend either clicking Expand All or Collapse All, just to make sure any of these drop-downs or expandable sections are either collapsed or fully expanded. The problem is if you're using the same test user and you've got thousands of different test cases that interact with this form, they're going to change the state of that form when you log in. So if your test case relies on this vendor's being expanded and all of a sudden it's not, then there's a good chance it's going to fail. So let's go ahead and click Collapse All, then click Vendors, and All Vendors. So if I were to run this test now, it's going to work every single time. I can run it 1,000 times. Okay, so that page is now loaded. Let's press New in the top. Great, that opens up. And here's the first field that we need to fill out is the vendor account. So vendor accounts in F&O are the same as like invoices. They have to be unique. So for this, I'm just going to type a static value for now. So E365 vendor 1, press tab. You'll see that's been captured on the left side. Now it's always better to use a variable for that, especially if it has to be unique data. But I'm going to continue with the recording as per my recommendation, and then come back to that later on. So for name, we'll just give it the same as the vendor account number. 1, and then group, and then press save. Okay, and then I'm going to press back. Great. So my test script is actually going to validate that that row got generated. But before we do that, let's go ahead and stop recording and let's clean up our test script here. So we know steps 1 to 7 are okay, but step 8 and 11 need some work. So let's go ahead and click into step 8. And we know that we want to replace this one with a variable. So I'm going to remove the value that's in there, click on our variable selector. And I've got one called my vendor here, so I'm just going to use that. You can also just create a variable and select variable. And then, of course, I want the name to have the exact same value. So I'm going to use the same variable. Awesome. So you see it turns pink. I'm using the my vendor variable in both of those fields. What I mentioned before, though, it has to be unique. So the best way to have unique data is to add a step before you use that variable, and we want to add modify variable. We're going to give it the same variable that we use for the field, so my vendor. And for function, we're going to do increment. So increment will essentially take the number on the end and add 1. So I can run this 1,000 times and it's just going to increment it every time. It's always going to be unique. Close that. And that's good to go. Now, before I run this, I do have a couple more recommendations. So let's click into that vendor. And before step 8. So the problem with F&O as well is that they have these expandable sections. If these aren't expanded and your test script needs to interact with one of these, the test script will fail because it can't see those fields. So it's normally better to add a step at the start of the form to expand that section at the top here. Expand or collapse section. I'm going to use the field selector. And I want this field here, this section here to be expanded. If I wanted to expand address, I can just select address. Let's select this one. And then just to demonstrate that, I'll run it. Run step. There you go. So it goes and expands it. In this case, it's already expanded. So it doesn't need to do anything further. Okay, and then at the very end of the test script, we also wanted to wanted to verify that our row got created. Whenever you verify something or interact with a grid in F&O, you should always filter. So at the end of the test, let's add column filter. I'm going to use the field inspector here, or magic wand, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to select the column that I want to filter. So vendor account. The filter method I'm going to leave as exactly, and the value I can use my variable again, because we want to validate that the vendor we just created with this variable is displaying. Great. So let's run this step. I'll show you how that looks. This is one of our managed commands, so we keep it up to date on every version. I recommend where possible using these managed commands over your own recorded logic because they'll be more stable, especially this filter command where there's a lot of different logic behind the scenes. You want to make sure that you're using ours because it's going to work every single time, and we've tested it on every possible grid or table in F&O. But that worked in this case. Obviously, it's filtering on this variable that we just selected rather than the actual vendor we just created. When we run the test fully, you'll see it shows the row correctly though. Temporarily, I'm just going to clear this. Okay, so I think we're good to run this. So let's go back to the home page and we'll run the test script from step 2. Run from here. So you see the vendors is already expanded. If it was to click on vendors again, it's going to collapse it, meaning the all vendors field would just suddenly disappear. So that's why we added the collapse all, just to make sure it's reset. We want to do that with any sort of form or progressive element that we come across. There we go. Make sure general's expanded. Vendor account, use the variable. We should see the same happen for name. And we don't use a variable for group. You can if you like, but I don't need to. It's just a static value for me. And it clicks save and then back. Perfect. Now it should filter, and this time we'll have an actual row display. Excellent. So that test script passed. But a test script without a verification is not a test script. It's just automation. So let's go ahead and add a verification. I'm going to search verify. There's a few options to choose from. Verify using AI. I've got a separate video on our YouTube channel showing how to use that. or verify field, which is my recommendation to ensure that your test script is reliable and deterministic. So verify field, use the magic wand or field inspector tool to select this vendor account row. We want to check that it is present, and then the verification for the actual content of that field, we want to make sure that it contains a specific value or is equal to. We'll do is equal in this case. For the value, I can just use the variable again. My vendor, select, that's set up. Go ahead and run this step. Perfect, that passed. If we click into this, just one quick note, you'll notice sometimes when you select a field on the page or record a field on the page, it includes this value. This is just a reference to the value at the time of recording. It can be useful in some cases. We just add it for additional context. But field labels, they can be renamed. You can edit this and it doesn't change the test, it's just the label. So I can remove that if I wanted to, or I can go ahead and rename it to vendor account row. It doesn't change anything other than the readability of the test script. Okay, so this is a fully working test script. I do recommend that you run your tests at least 3 times when you've completed them, just to ensure that they're reliable. If they only work once and then fail in the next run, then it's not a good test case and it's not going to be usable. You may also come across checkboxes as part of your test script. The way that Microsoft does them in the core Dynamics apps is a little bit odd. So we made some commands for those ones as well. I'll just open up the user options just because I know that's where a checkbox is present. There we go. So if we wanted to toggle any of these on, what I recommend instead of using the recorder is just to use one of our managed commands here. So toggle checkbox, field inspector, and then we'll just choose one of these. Try to highlight both of the checkbox and the labels or values. And we can set it to true. And then if I go ahead and run this, you see it takes its time, but it does identify both the checkbox and the actual value to reference. And then in a second, we'll go ahead and toggle it. There we go. And do a quick validation to make sure it actually changed. So yeah, if you need to interact with a checkbox or radio in D365, use our manage command for that. It'll be the most reliable way to do it. I'm going to remove that from our test though. But yeah, that is kind of the core best practice of recording in D365, finance and operations. The only thing I would really like to add to that is if you need to change the legal entity or the actual page directly, it's easier to do it from the URL, and it's also the fastest way to do it instead of just navigating to these. The way you can do it is, let's just add it to the start of the test script, add step, after. And if we scroll down, there's a command here called set URL query param. How this works is we can give it the parameter inside of the URL. So for example, CMP is our company, CMP, and then we can give it a value. So the value is currently USMF, but if I change it to demo, then it's going to change it from company USMF to company demo, which doesn't actually exist. So maybe I should just use DAT. And then if I run this by itself, we should see it attempt to change legal entity. There you go. So you see in the URL, it has changed to DAT. You can do the same thing for the page as well. You just use MI for the query param, and then whatever the page name is to change it. Another way to do this is just to change the URL directly. So add step after, navigate, and here we can just put in a URL. So for example, I copy this, I can change this to USMF, press tab, and then just run this step. Of course, this does also mean you can go to the URL directly instead of navigating via the modules, but I do find that most customers like to navigate to the modules to make sure that they haven't suddenly changed after an update and they're still working and they've still got the correct security roles and all that. But you can see, yeah, both of these work. We can navigate directly, or we can use the set URL query param to do it easily as well. Go ahead and remove those. You'll notice that the actual recording that I did just focused on the core interaction, so clicking and typing. And then once I'd done those, I disabled the recorder and I manually went through and just updated this test script, added extra commands, etc. The recorder really is just there to capture the basics, and then it's up to you to go into the steps and enhance them and make them more of a test case, add verifications, etc. The same as if you were to import a task recording. It would have all the core interactions, but then you'd want to go in and clean it up, turn it into more of a test case. So yeah, takeaways from this, make sure that you're always resetting the page when you go into it. So if you're going into a module, make sure to expand or collapse. When you're going into a form with expandable sections, make sure to expand the one you're utilizing. When you're going into a table, make sure to filter on that table, whether you're verifying or even just interacting. If you're going into a lookup, I didn't mention this, but this is important as well. I recommend typing the value directly instead of using the lookup. If the lookup is part of your test, then you absolutely can do it by clicking the drop-down icon. But again, because this is a table or a grid, make sure to filter on this before selecting that value. It's just going to make your test script more reliable. But yeah, that's a quick introduction or demonstration of how to record a test script in the best way possible for D365 Finance and Operations. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the team. Bye.